If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to Mindshock True Crime. This is your host, Bruce McGuire. This is the Idaho Students' Murders, Episode 3, The Mosow Slayer. We will be examining many different links, connections, and even an actual Instagram account by that name, The Mosow Slayer, that just so happened to follow the victims on Instagram. Is this social media related? We will also be examining anomalies in the timelines leading up to the murders, as well as connections with frats and sororities. Does the key lie in that direction? And many more other curiosities and coincidences in one of the most shocking crimes in history, this quadruple homicide in Mosow, Idaho. As always, if you find the podcast interesting and informative and want to help keep up awareness in recent cases, cold cases, wrongful convictions, missing persons, and more, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell for notifications. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell for notifications. A like and share. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get a priority for case topological analysis, co-podcast requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind. Leave them in the comment section. Okay, so there's quite a few things to go over. Let's start with this. This is meaw.com, meaww.com. Some people think it's similar to TMZ, but they do have links and sources here. The Idaho murders, ex-NYPD cop says killer is active on online communities to stay ahead of the police, by Varnika Srivastava. Alfred Titus, a retired NYPD homicide detective and hostage negotiator, revealed how online netizens' research keeps a killer safe and sound. Police reported that detectives have relocated 5 vehicles from the crime scene to a storage location where they will continue to examine them and process evidence in the investigation into the gruesome stabbings that claimed the lives of 4 University of Idaho students inside their home earlier this month. Police said that the tips and 911 calls are still coming in 2 weeks after the 4 University of Idaho students were fatally stabbed in their dorms, but no suspect has been named. And just to clarify, it's not the dorms of the university. This is an off-campus house, although right next to the campus. Although the perpetrator is still at large and officials appear to be no closer to solving the crime, police in Idaho are finishing their investigation at the residence where 4 University of Idaho students were brutally slain. But the alarming question is why the authorities cannot catch the killer. As per reported by CBS News, is the killer following up on the online group theories that is helping him stay ahead of the investigation? Recently, News Nation interviewed Alfred Titus, a retired NYPD homicide detective and hostage negotiator. He revealed a few ways in which online netizens' research keeps a killer safe and sound from the police. Titus said, quote, "A killer would go into these chat rooms and get involved with the conversations to try to stay ahead of the investigation. A lot of times, this information comes from different sources that the killer is aware that he may miss in these chat rooms. Everything is pretty much up to date, and it's a good source of information for the killer." End quote. When News Nation asked if they may be unknowingly helping this killer, Titus went on to say and added, quote, "It is very likely that the information they are giving him is helping him stay abreast of everything that's going on. He can monitor several news agencies and several news station platforms." He further added, "He can get all of his info from online sources, and in addition to that, they're getting info that may not have even reached social media." End quote. The 3 female students shared a 3-story home on King Road with 2 other roommates, while Chapin stayed the night with his lover, Kernodle. 2 fatalities were discovered on the house's 3rd floor, while the other 2 were found on the 2nd story. The other 2 roommates were unscathed and appeared to have survived the murders. Several officials have described the murder scene as bloody, unlike anything they had ever seen before, because each victim was stabbed multiple times with a fixed blade knife and bled dead in the house. So here's another article by Kunal Day, November 30th, 2022. Ethan Chapin and Zaina Kernodle, police unable to explain 5-hour gap in tragic pairs movements. Authorities are still clueless about a 5-hour gap in the reported whereabouts of University of Idaho students Zaina Kernodle and Ethan Chapin the night before they and 2 other students were viciously stabbed to death. Moscow police are working tirelessly to solve the murders of Chapin 20, Kernodle 20, Medicine Mojan 21, and Kaylee Gonzalez 21, who were found stabbed to death on November 13th on the 2nd and 3rd floors of an off-campus residence in Mosow, Idaho. The quadruple homicide is believed to have been committed using a fixed-blade knife as the students were asleep. Their roommates, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk, were reportedly in the house at the time of the slayings, but were unharmed. They are said to have woken up hours later and called 911 after discovering the bodies. Idaho police confirmed that Mortensen and Funk are not suspects, although some people do believe that they just said that. Investigators determined that Chapin and Kernodle were last seen at a party at the Sigma Chi fraternity house on the University of Idaho campus at 735 Nez Pierce Drive at around 9 p.m. local time. At approximately 1:45 a.m., the couple is believed to have returned to the residence at 1122 King Road. News Nation's Brian Enton reported that the frat house where they partied is walking distance from the home and would not take more than 15 minutes to reach. Furthermore, there is no reported information from any Sigma Chi members who may have been at the party and seen Chapin and Kernodle. We do want to figure out what occurred between 9 p.m. and 1:45 a.m., who Chapin and Kernodle were with, and what was going on with them, Moscow police told Enton. Maybe any routes or passes they took to go home, these type of things potentially are critical to the investigation. Authorities are hoping that the students come back to campus. They will be able to help with more information about the duo's whereabouts. We want to talk to those people. That's important for us, the police said. The murdered students were reportedly found on the 2nd and 3rd floor of the residence, while the 2 roommates living on the ground floor, Funk and Mortensen, were spared. Authorities are trying to determine why they were spared and whether they slept through the attacks. Investigators said that each of the victims was stabbed multiple times and that the attacker used a fixed-blade knife to carry out the bloodbath. However, police are yet to identify a suspect. While authorities are trying to figure out who's responsible, they have ruled out a number of potential suspects, including Gonzalez's ex-boyfriend, Jack Decor, the man seen behind Gonzalez and Mojan at the food truck, the person who drove the girls home, surviving roommates Mortensen and Funk, as well as the friends called to the house by the surviving roommates the morning of November 13th. While law enforcement officials believe the attack was targeted, they have asked the Moscow community to remain vigilant. Meanwhile, University of Idaho administrators have ramped up security around campus for the remainder of the semester. So here's another interesting theory by Arunava Chakrabarti, also on Mia.com. Idaho murders. Did Ethan Chapin save the girls from being sexually assaulted? Web sleuths float new theory. According to another Redditor, Unproven Theory, the killer almost had his way with the girls, but Ethan Chapin's appearance ruined his plans. Web sleuths have been on overdrive for the past few days as they churn out one random theory after another about the Idaho murders that took place more than 2 weeks ago, November 13th. 4 University of Idaho students were brutally killed, likely while they were asleep on early Sunday morning between 3 and 4 a.m. in an off-campus home close to the university. Police have still not been able to find the potential perpetrator or perpetrators in the murder case, and the motive is still a question that the authorities have failed to answer. According to primary investigation reports, no money or expensive valuables were found stolen, and none of the victims were sexually assaulted, which has further prompted law enforcement to conclude that it was a crime of passion. Now, a Redditor peddling a theory as to why none of the girls were sexually assaulted prior to their deaths. A Reddit user named Smash007 posted, "Do you think E was why they weren't sexually assaulted? Maybe he got interrupted." To which another user replied that they assumed that the killer most likely went after one particular girl with the intention of sexually assaulting her at knife point. But ultimately, 4 students ended up losing their lives as the killer was surprised by another girl in the room/bed with the target. A follow-up post here by Coffee a Day Doctor Away. You could be right. My totally unsubstantiated guess is that the original target was very likely planned to be a sexual assault at knife point. But that plan was upended when the killer was surprised by the other girl in the room/bed with the target. I'm inclined to think the entire situation unfolded very quickly. If the room was dark, perhaps the killer hopped into the bed expecting only his target to be there. But he was surprised by the shocked reaction of the friend there too, and both girls possibly started screaming. Then he freaks out and just goes into kill mode immediately to stop the screams. Now he's got to get the hell out of the house fast. He starts to book it downstairs and comes upon E in the hall or at the door of the bedroom, so he rushes and attacks him. Well, now X sees this unfolding and starts screaming, so now the killer rushes and attacks her in her bed. Once she's no longer screaming, the killer heads for the back door, hopping over E, who may still be alive but is incapacitated on the floor. This is the angle I've been considering more seriously, that it could have been an intended aggravated rape that turned into a quadruple homicide when the situation got unexpectedly out of hand. Wow, I mean, that is an interesting theory that also explains quite a few variables here. So let's get more into the anomaly and coincidence stack here. Also by Varnika Srivastava, November 29, 2022, Idaho murders. Cops were called to the party Xana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin attended hours before tragedy. And you know what's kind of crazy? Within 2-3 days, this was a rumor that was floated around. I mean, has this been 100% verified now? That's crazy how like a lot of these early rumors end up being true. It doesn't say that this is true here. So it has been claimed that the police were called into the party Xana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin attended on the night the four friends were murdered at a rental home only a few yards from the University of Idaho campus in Moscow. Police have been working around the clock for days to solve the murders, but have been unable to break the case open after 2 weeks. Kaylee Gonzalez, 21, Madison Mogen, 21, Kernodle, 20, and Chapin, 20, were fatally stabbed in the early morning hours of November 13th. They were found dead on 2 different stories of a 3-story residence. 3 women resided there, and Chapin, who was a guest, was Kernodle's boyfriend. Between 10 p.m. and 1:30 a.m. on November 13th, Kaylee Gonzalez and Madison Mogen were at the Corner Club, a neighborhood pub located at 202 North Main Street in Moscow. They were captured on camera at the Grub Truck at 318 South Main Street around 1:40 in the morning. Then they used a private party to get a ride home from downtown and arrived at their 1122 King Road residence at 1:56 in the morning. Based on digital evidence gathered by the investigators, their estimated time of arrival at the residence was revised. Meanwhile, according to the findings of the investigation, Ethan Chapin and Xana Kernodle arrived at the party between 8 and 9 o'clock at the Sigma Chi House on the University of Idaho campus. But what happened at the Sigma Chi where the fraternity party took place? News Nation correspondent Brian Enton recently unveiled details about the frat house party where Ethan and Xana were present. An individual from Chicago asked on News Nation, why were the police called to the party that Ethan and Xana were at? Does that scene have any relation to the crime, or was the couple involved in a fight at the party? Brian responded, quote, we don't know much. We don't know any of the details. We know that there are reports that police were at the frat party. It really could have been anything. It may have had nothing to do with them with the 2 victims. It could have been something totally unrelated. I will tell you this, though. Going to the fraternities and sororities today and trying to get them to talk, it's not easy right now. They've been told not to talk to the media and only talk to the police, end quote. According to the University of Idaho, Chapin was a member of the Sigma Chi fraternity and majored in the administration of recreation, sport, and tourism. Both Kernodle and Mogen majored in marketing and were members of the sorority Pi Beta Phi. Gonzalez was a member of Alpha Phi and majored in general studies. The last homicide in Moscow was in 2015. Numerous federal and state law enforcement officers have been sent in to help municipal police identify the perpetrator and the motive behind the quadruple murder, as reported by Fox News. I mean, I'm going to get into more details here, but... So, Kernodle and Mogen are in the same sorority, but Mogen's best friend, Gonzalez, is in a different sorority. I mean, I don't know. From reports, they were basically inseparable, etc., etc. They're in different sororities. What does that mean? I don't know. So let's flip it to the other side now. Normal night in Moscow. Sorority sister recalls Idaho victim Madison Mogen's final hours before the murder. By Shadia Zubair, November 30th, 2022, also on meaw.com. Madison Mogen was spotted having a normal night out with her friends just hours before the tragedy struck. It's been 2 weeks since an unknown assailant brutally killed 4 University of Idaho students. The sorority sister and classmate of the 2 victims told that she saw one of the victims, Madison Mogen, having a typical night in an Idaho club hours before the horrific incident took place, reported Fox News. Mogen, 21, spent most of the evening of November 12th in Moscow's Idaho Corner Club, where she was observed, quote, just laughing with all her friends, end quote, according to Madison Moy, a classmate and neighbor. So Madison Mogen has a classmate and neighbor known as Madison Moy. So not only the same first name, not only the first letter of the last name being the same, but also the second and the fourth. While cops confirmed Kylie Gonzalez was also with Mogen on the same night. It was just a normal night in Moscow, Moy, a 21-year-old sophomore, told Fox News Digital on Monday. Moscow is a safe place. Nothing like this ever happens. I didn't think anything of it. Moy said Mogen was at the club for the majority of the night. Police stated that Mogen and Kaylee Gonzalez left the bar at 1:30 a.m. on Sunday and went to a food truck nearby before returning home at 1:56 a.m. Moy claimed she had visited the house every so often before it became a murder scene and claimed she had been there for events or times that the girls would just hang out, and she added that the girls' deaths have been extremely difficult for her. The Vandal community is really close, and it just kind of put a darkness over it, she said. She claimed that she had not seen Mogen and Kernodle as regularly because they had left the sorority the previous semester, as per Fox News. Last week, the University of Idaho's Pi Beta Phi chapter posted a photo of Mogen and Kernodle on Instagram, calling them bright young women with an incredible future. Maddie was the sweetest soul who was passionate about every aspect of her life. She shared her brilliance with those around her, the post stated. Xana was a magnet for positive energy and always radiated the energy back into the world. We know others in our community are also hurting. We grieve with them and share the weight of their sorrow, the post read. Moy resides in a home just behind the crime scene. She claimed she didn't go when police allegedly discovered a large number of bodies inside the house when they arrived on November 13th. When asked about the possibility that the killer might have passed through her yard, she responded, "It's definitely something that crossed my mind, and that's really terrifying." Most of her classmates walk to campus for class, and she often uses a shortcut through the parking lot behind the victims' homes to get to campus. After returning to campus and classes on Monday, November 28th, Moy said she is changing her habits and will carry pepper spray. On Monday, November 28th, a single marked police car was spotted in front of the residence. Despite it being more than 2 weeks since the victims were found, crime scene tape remains on the perimeter. So Moy here is, not only did she not leave school, apparently she's still, or maybe she did leave and then come back, but, so she lives right behind the house. Although the attack has been described as targeted, officials have not yet revealed who the intended victims were. The FBI portal has received more than 488 digital media submissions over the weekend, police said on Sunday. As of Wednesday, investigators have collected 103 pieces of evidence from the crime scene and taken roughly 4,000 photographs. In addition to processing over 1,000 tips, investigators interviewed 150 people. So there doesn't seem anything super out of the ordinary unless you want to refer to the hooded guy at the food truck from the side of Madison and Kaylee. Whereas Xana and Ethan, they're at a frat party which may have had the police called there, and there's a 5-hour unaccounted for window on their side. So let's get more into the sorority angle. This is by Jenna Anna Matthew, November 30th, 2022, also on meow.com. Idaho victims sororities, Alpha Phi and Pi Beta Phi, put on probation over health and safety violations. The two University of Idaho sororities are on probation for violations or concerns regarding risk management, alcohol/drugs, or hazing. Also, let's not forget the so-called pranks with the skinned coyotes in previous years. Very scary stuff here linked to the sororities. It has been nearly 3 weeks since the gruesome murders of 4 University of Idaho students. As police are desperately probing the massacre, the 2 sororities to which 3 of the slain University of Idaho students belonged are on disciplinary probation. Victims Kaylee Gonzalez was a member of Alpha Phi, while Xana Kernodle and Maddie Mogen were members of Pi Beta Phi. Alpha Phi and Pi Beta Phi are the only 2 listed as on probation for health and safety reasons out of the 10 sororities recognized by the University of Idaho. Is that coincidental? The health and safety reasons refer to violations or concerns regarding risk management, alcohol, drugs, or hazing. In addition to being on probation with the university, Alpha Phi is also on a restorative plan with the national organization. Pi Beta Phi is in good standing with the sorority's headquarters, according to Fox News. No suspect or murder weapon has been seized in connection to the deaths of Kaylee Gonzalez, 21, Madison Mogen, 21, Xana Kernodle, 20, and Ethan Chapin, 20, on November 13th. On Tuesday, November 29th, a spokesperson for Pi Beta Phi's headquarters said Kernodle and Mogen were close friends of our members at the Idaho Alpha chapter at the University of Idaho. They and their families, along with the entire Vandal community, are in the thoughts of Pi Beta Phi members across North America. The emailed statement read, according to the source, Pi Beta Phi's focus is on supporting our chapter members at the University of Idaho throughout this tragedy. Victim Kernodle was at the Sigma Chi frat house before the murders with her boyfriend Ethan Chapin as a member of the fraternity. The pair then returned to Kernodle's off-campus residence less than a half a mile away from the frat house around 1:45 a.m. While Gonzalez and Mogen were at the Corner Club from roughly 10 p.m. on November 12th to 1:40 a.m. on November 13th. The local bar was described by a fellow University of Idaho student as the heart of Greek life on campus, with large crowds on most Fridays and Saturdays. Okay, so interesting. So there's 10 sororities. The only 2 on probation with issues are the 2 that the victims belong to. Is that curious? And again, when you factor in the coyotes and all these other pranks, is there some occult angle here? And we're going to get into more of that. So let's get to the Mosow Slayer. I mean, this is really, really dark stuff. And I will give I guess I'll give what we can call the McGuire theory here thus far, even though there's obviously not enough information here. Who is the Mosow Slayer? Instagram user followed all University of Idaho victims and posted knife pics. As police are doing their work, web sleuths are hard at work doing their own digging to find the murderer who stabbed the 4 students. By Deepak Kumar, November 29, 2022, also on meaw.com. The investigation into the University of Idaho murders continues as police are yet to find a potential suspect or a lead. As police are doing their work, web sleuths are hard at work doing their own digging to find the murderer. Certain social media posts are claiming that there's an Instagram user who goes by the name of the Mosow Slayer who could be the person behind the massacre. As of now, there is no trace of the suspect or the murder weapon, even after officials have followed more than 600 tips and conducted almost 100 interviews. People have now discovered an Instagram account that followed all of the Idaho murder victims. Even though the account has been deleted, several screenshots have found their way to the internet. The bio of the account reads, car dealership owner and retired Tier 1 Special Mission Unit JSOC operator, SEAL Team 6. Does that seem legit to anybody? Some users who discovered the account before it was deleted saw the person operating the account was following the victims and had pictures of a knife, which hints towards the fact that all of the victims were stabbed and died due to deep wounds. The attacks have been deemed targeted by the police. There's a screenshot here with a folding knife. Never a dull moment with my Millie. This is the last knife that I carried into combat. I might have taken out a few bad dudes with it, Then there's blood droplet emoji and skull and crossbone emoji. Internet discovers cryptic posts from the Mosow Slayer. One suspicious user wrote there was an IG account linked to Kill the Icons movie mocking the victims before and after, and it was called the Mosow Slayer. Another user tweeted, what kind of a person is following the victims on Instagram and has an account called the Mosow Slayer and posts this weird expletive? One more user wrote, the Mosow Slayer ass that posted on Dead Girl's IG had photo of him holding military knife, wore gloves in the photo. I have to think if you have a knife like that, you probably bought the gloves. BOGO. One suspicious user questioned, the other disturbing item is the IG account of the Mosow Slayer or something similar. Has that been discussed? Another user who saw a post on the potential suspect's account wrote, username Mosow Slayer on Instagram had a post a day ago that said he misplaced a K-bar knife a few days ago, but deleted it is not lying here. One more user wrote, another disturbed individual is the reprobate that uses the pseudonym the Mosow Slayer on Instagram. Some people think this individual is involved, others think they are trolling. Personally, it's hard to say, but it's clear this individual should be looked into. So here's my first thought of this. So is it confirmed whether or not he followed them before their deaths, or was it after? So, I mean, that's the biggest piece there. If it was before. Now, this just jumped out to me. Again, nothing to do with murder, but just thinking back to high school days, I don't know how prominent this would be in college. I don't remember this type of activity in college, but in high school with like a smaller student body. So the numbers as of last year are 8,631 undergrad students. So there's 8,631 students. So presumably, if this Mosow Slayer is friends with all four of the victims and he's only or following all four of the victims, is he only following like, let's say 50 accounts, 100 accounts? If he's following 1 million accounts and like literally every single student at the University of Idaho, then that's not as suspicious because if he's just following all of them. But if he's only following a few students and they happen to be among the few, that's kind of weird. So what I was going to say is in high school, where there's small circles of friends, that there's certain inside jokes and pranks. Like if there's some kind of occult angle or some kind of kill with a knife prank going around, that's like a common prank that's certain, it's like an inside joke. And someone outside of the immediate circle might have also heard of the joke, and then they can reference it or do other pranks, etc. Now, obviously, this has nothing to do with actually killing people, but if the real, it seems kind of strange that the real killer would post himself doing that. Is it more likely that the real killer knew about this inside joke and wanted to point suspicion in either the direction of the Mosow Slayer, if the Mosow Slayer followed all these victims and was part of their inside circle in some way? Because the description that he's SEAL Team 6, all that could be made up nonsense, and it could actually be a student. Or if it's an older guy, I mean, that's a tougher one. But if it's a student, if it's a fellow student or possibly more than one fellow student, if they know about some kind of inside joke with skinning people, using knives to kill whatever, like as a joke, obviously in the coyote situation, I mean, that's above and beyond just an innocent joke. But if there's some kind of constant reference or inside joking regarding the occult, as rumors suggest, that there's some kind of occult angle here with these sororities and fraternities, possible hazing involving the occult. If there's some kind of inside joke where people keep joking about like slashing throats or whatever, like sick, dark jokes, not ever dreaming anybody would actually do this. If there's someone either inside the circle or outside the circle that knows about the joking, would they set something up this way so they killed them for whatever reason and they want to point suspicion at someone inside the circle who knows about some kind of an inside joke or something regarding somebody getting slashed or using knives, and if it's like been an ongoing thing? That kind of jumped out to me immediately. Then again, if really disturbed, it obviously would be super dumb to have your all of this on Instagram. If this is that disturbed an individual that, you know, when someone's that disturbed, I mean, logic kind of goes out the window, so maybe they would leave all these digital footprints. Just, I'd have to lean to not, because if they're that sloppy, I mean, why would they not have been caught already? But either way, a very creepy angle here. So just really, really creepy. And if the posts were made, if he followed them before the murders, and there's also the posts after the murders, I mean, what does that mean? I mean, just really, really creepy stuff here that doesn't really make a lot of sense. So another possible occult angle here. Eerie, eagle-eyed internet users find Anubis, the god of the dead, in Idaho murder house's pick. Anubis, the ancient Egyptian god of the afterlife, as well as the patron god of lost souls, is often symbolized as a jackal. By Tuhin Chakraborty. Also on Meow.com, December 2nd, 2022. As the investigation into the University of Idaho students' killings of Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin continues, social media users have ensured they are actively involved every step of the way. An eagle-eyed user posted a snapshot from a recent Daily Mail article that showed the house where the tragic killing took place. The user wrote on Twitter with the picture, "Maybe this is a random, unrelated tidbit, but did anyone else notice what appears to be an Egyptian deity in this Daily Mail UK photograph from the Moscow murder's house?" while referring to blood visible on one of the windows. Anubis, another user, replied. The user later wrote in another tweet, "Yup, Anubis, god of the dead, in the house where 4 youngsters were brutally murdered. It's an eerie coincidence." According to Daily Mail, this is the home where the homicides occurred. Look right above the tow truck driver to the window. I may be incorrect, but to me that looks like a depiction in the window of Anubis, god of death from Egyptian mythology, the user added. Okay, another issue here, I mean, this might be a really weird coincidence. Varnika Srivastava also posted this December 1st, 2022 on Meow.com. Google Trends show peak in how to get away with murder. Search a day before the tragedy. It has been more than 2 weeks since the 4 University of Idaho students were brutally stabbed to death while they were asleep, shocking Moscow, a small town in Idaho, as well as the rest of the nation. Now, web sleuths have discovered a shocking fact. How to get away with murder was the most searched topic on Google a day before the murders. Ever since news about the murders broke, web sleuths have been scouring the internet voraciously, floating one unproven and arbitrary theory after another. A Reddit user now claimed that how to get away with murder was at the peak on Google search a day before the murders took place. The post reads, "How accurate is Google Trends? Sunday 6th to Saturday 12th, there was a peak in searching how to get away with murder from Idaho." This still leaves a lot of unanswered questions, such as, was the killer trying to find an escape route using Google? None of these theories have been confirmed by authorities or anyone connected to the case so far. In fact, Gonzalez's sister, Olivier, recently slammed web sleuths for coming up with such theories. I mean, yeah, if you look at that, that is kind of crazy. Because if you look at Google Trends for Idaho, there's huge spikes on the days leading up to 13th. So there's nothing. Even on Halloween, there's nothing. All the way up through the beginning of November, there's nothing. And then after the 13th, nothing. So if we're using controls here, that is unusual that in Idaho there's these huge spikes for how to get away with murder. I mean, that's kind of crazy. How many people are researching this, and why are they only researching it those days? And that's kind of a random generic thing, but... Alright, let's go over a few more things. Idaho murders. Retired cop says DNA is going to be tough as crime scene was party house with many guests. Arunava Chakrabarti, November 30th, 2022. Moscow Police Department said on its website that forensic evidence collected from the crime scene is still being processed. As law enforcement try to ascertain the main perpetrator or perpetrators behind the grisly murders of 4 University of Idaho students, experts claim that DNA evidence in the case may be arduous for investigators. Besides the victims, 2 other roommates who also lived in the same house escaped unharmed as they slept through the attacks and are not believed to be involved in the crime. The slayings have left the community tense and on alert as the police are yet to identify a murder suspect or locate a murder weapon. Moscow Police Department said on its website that forensic evidence collected from the crime scene is still being processed. According to authorities, more than 100 pieces of physical evidence were collected and taken to the Idaho State Police Crime Lab. Experts say that retrieving DNA evidence may be difficult for investigators due to the nature and location of the crime. It's 5 young women that occupy that space regularly. And when you have one who has a boyfriend that was there, obviously, and is one of the victims, Joseph Scott Morgan, a distinguished scholar of applied forensics at Jacksonville State University in Alabama, told Newsweek, you're going to have their common DNA in that house just as a result of occupancy. Neighbors have told reporters that parties and gatherings were frequently held at the house, while police have said the surviving roommates summoned friends to the residence before the 911 call, requesting aid was made at 11:58 a.m. Responding officers located the victims on the second and third floors of the house. Morgan says those people likely left crucial evidence of their presence, such as skin cells and hair, too. All of that is to be taken into the account, he said. If any of these occupants had other romantic partners, perhaps they would be with more frequency than others, then there might be a robust DNA signature left behind by those individuals. It's a big obstacle for the investigators to overcome. Online sleuths have latched onto Jeremy Regan, a neighbor of the Idaho murder victims, and deemed him a suspect. Regan tells that these people have been ruthless about digging into his entire personal life. And apparently he also supplied DNA as well, so he can be ruled out. I mean, was he never in the house? Another article here, I found a glove at the scene. Retired detective's discovery fuels more speculation about Idaho murders. Recently, Chris McDonough, a seasoned homicide detective, unveiled some chilling information from the crime scene in the Interview Room show. Chris and his wife, Karen, who runs the show with him, claimed to have found a glove near the crime scene, leading to speculation that it belonged to the murderer. In the interview, Chris said, all right, so this is the old homicide guy in me. I actually found a glove and turned it. I pointed it out to the officer who was there securing the scene, and they came and they collected it. So this has been, a very heavy scene as a whole. He continued pointing at the scene, but if you notice underneath those leaves in the snow, you'll see here, I'll point it out to you that I discovered the glove, and fortunately, they collected it. Karen added, it should be noted that anybody crossed any line, you could just visibly see it right from the road. Chris said later, yeah, and so a couple thoughts come to mind. I'm not saying this is a good thing or a bad thing, right? Fortunately, it's still on the other side of the tape, and so they still had control of that scene. The officer that was there, obviously they didn't know about it because he came over and photographed it. He later said they had evidence, tech, and immediately, later they'd come out and got it. So here's the question. Is this from the night? Is it random, i.e. somebody missed the trash can, they were walking by and they threw it? Or is it the suspect taunting the authorities by, placing something like this hypothetically? Either way, there's a glove, and it was collected after I brought it to their attention, he added. It's definitely worth pointing out that we don't know how long it's been there, don't know who it belongs to, and police made a note of it and collected it. So, another issue with the DNA by Piyush Arora, November 30th, 2022. Web sleuths believe DNA of suspect found, as Nancy Grace says, it's not coming up on CODIS. Investigators have reportedly sent 113 pieces of physical evidence they collected to the Idaho State Police Crime Lab for analysis. Many spurious and wild conspiracy theories started doing the rounds on the internet after renowned journalist Nancy Grace appeared on Fox and Friends and stated the perp is most likely not a convicted felon because he is not popping up on AFIS or CODIS. That's telling me a lot about who this is. She also revealed that investigators are going to use genealogical DNA to get their hands on the suspect or suspects. Citing Grace's revelation, a Reddit user who goes by the username of Blue Roses 90 noted, did we miss something? Seems like she has inside knowledge that they do have the perp's DNA. ETA, CODIS is for DNA, while AFIS is for fingerprints. If Nancy's correct, it could mean that they have the perp's DNA and prints as well. A second user backed the claim and wrote, maybe that's what Xana's dad meant when he said she had fought back. He seemed to say it proudly, which is understandable, but maybe he was proud because she got DNA that could help find the killer. Of course, they have the DNA. I don't find it weird that it's not in their system. This guy's probably college age or a little older, and that's still pretty young in terms of becoming a felon, said the third user, while the fourth asserted, I feel like they have to, but unclear if the same DNA would already be in the house. Also, it's probably rare for college kids to have a felony record versus an older individual. Yeah, I mean, those are all good points there as well. I don't know many people at college that would be in CODIS, so seems accurate. I can't stand Nancy Grace, but I don't think it's too big of a leap to believe that the killer isn't in the database, another user said. Okay, here's the thing though, like which DNA are they referencing? Is it DNA from just people randomly in the house? Like how do they know that would be the DNA of the perp? So, I mean, that's a curiosity. If it's under her fingernails, I mean, that is interesting. But there's also 5 hours unaccounted for. Did they get into a fight with somebody? Is it possible that fight is not related to what ultimately happened? I mean, there's just this 5 hour gap in Ethan Chapman and Xana Kernodle's movements. That's kind of hard to overcome. I mean, if you don't have a timeline, how can you determine anybody they potentially could have interacted with? And then also, is it someone Ethan and Xana interacted with, or Kaylee and Maddie? Or is there crossover? Is it both? Because there's some kind of overlap in their Greek life. They're all members or former members of the same sororities. Ethan's a member of the frat. Like, what is going on at this campus? Another post here, internet baffled by how Idaho quadruple murder suspect left 0 prints in the house after senseless slaughter. So supposedly this is a blood-soaked crime scene, but there were no prints. Does that mean there was no footprints, even any kind of footprints? So I think they're referring to not even like blood prints. So if the killer's in the middle of this bloodbath, you would think there'd be some sprayed blood. Other users are now speculating that there's some kind of this guy used a hazmat suit. And also, if this was somebody who was known to them and had been in that house many times for parties, etc., how could they prove it was... I mean, yeah, it's tough. Unless it's under the fingernails of any of the victims. Another article here, more than one killer involved in massacre, famed pathologist says. Dr. Cyril Wecht reportedly wanted to know how long the suspect or suspects remained inside the property and the number of stab wounds sustained by each victim. A well-known forensic pathologist has claimed that the 4 University of Idaho students murdered on November 13th could have been slaughtered by more than one killer. Dr. Cyril Wecht, known for conducting several high-profile forensic investigations over the decades, said he found it difficult to believe that one person could methodically and stealthily butcher 4 individuals in one house while 2 other roommates slept in other rooms. 4 young people get stabbed without fighting back. I mean, how does that happen? Dr. Wecht told Radar Online. I kind of think there may have been more than one assailant to have killed 4 people like that and not have an audible altercation or cries for help, he added. You have to wonder if there was more than one assailant. There was no noise, no altercation, question mark. The veteran pathologist, 91, has investigated the deaths of several popular figures, including Marilyn Monroe, JFK, and even the 1969 Charles Manson murders. He reportedly also wondered how long the suspect or suspects remained inside the property and the number of stab wounds sustained by each victim. Here's the thing, though. So, again, people are actually speculating that the original house was much smaller, and that was the downstairs area where the unharmed roommates were, and then they built and added onto the house, which is why the downstairs area where the roommates were on the first level, that the walls are much thicker, so that's why you wouldn't necessarily hear the other screams. But between the second and third levels, they could theoretically hear each other. So that's the explanation given there. Okay, so let's go to Fox News here. Police shed light on 6th person listed on lease at Mosow home. Idaho police say they do not believe the 6th roommate of the University of Idaho student slain earlier this month was involved in the quadruple homicide, which remains unsolved after 19 days. The Mosow Police Department revealed Thursday that a 6th person was listed on the lease at 1122 King Road, which had been considered a crime scene since the November 13th bloodshed. Officials revealed hours later that the person had moved out prior, before the school year began, and was not present at the address at the time that the 4 students were killed. The Friday afternoon press release further stated that detectives do not believe this person has any involvement in the murders. Also, supposedly, another post here on meow.com that might be relevant. The tragic reason Kaylee Gonzalez was in the murder house on that fateful night. November 20th, 2022 by Kunal Dang. The devastated parents of University of Idaho victim Kaylee Gonzalez have revealed how their daughter was supposed to be with them for the holidays, but went back to college to show off her new car to her friends. It's been a week since the bodies of Kaylee and 3 other students, Madison Mojin, Xana Kernadal, and Ethan Chapin, were found stabbed to death in a home near campus in the early hours of November 13th. Kaylee's mother said that her daughter had been home with her family in the days leading up to the incident, but decided to return to Moscow for a couple of nights before moving home for good for the holidays. And you know what's weird? Apparently there's still some discussion here on whether or not she had already technically moved out to the point where all her stuff was at home. And is that the reason she was sleeping in the same bed as Madison in her room, because she no longer had another room, or there was nothing in the other room? Is that what happened? Again, none of this has been corroborated anyway. But the other point that this has kind of bothered me for a while, was it common for them to sleep in the same bed? Or if one of them had a stalker, were they sleeping in the same bed because they were afraid to sleep in different rooms for whatever reason? So there's a lot of question marks here. Kaylee was just home, her mother, Christy Gonzalez, told Fox 28 Spokane. She went back and forth all day long about whether or not she should go back to Moscow. Christy said her daughter finally decided to head back as she was eager to flaunt the new vehicle she had purchased all on her own. The tragic 21-year-old was looking forward to graduating in December and even had a job lined up. Her parents noted that she had so much to celebrate, with their daughter even promising to treat them with her own money upon her return. We talked a lot, Christy said. I know she had a fun time Friday night. She called me around 2:30 Saturday afternoon. Unfortunately, that was the last conversation they had. Christy recalled reaching out to her daughter via text late Sunday morning to ask how the evening went. She initially did not worry when she received no response. I looked back at the times, and that's when the police were swarming her house, the embattled mother said. The family was notified by police of their daughter's murder late Sunday afternoon, and they are still overwhelmed with grief and several unanswered questions a week after the fact. We have no idea why, none, Christy said. Whoever did this is dangerous, and we fear this person can do it again. Loved ones are constantly plagued by the fear that the killer, who is still at large, could be anyone. The services for these victims will be huge, public, Christy said, and to think the person could be there sitting at the church, I can't, and their candlelight vigils, all of it, it makes me sick thinking that person could be right behind us. It's sickening, sickening, we're sick. Authorities are yet to reveal any suspects or person of interest in connection with the case, but Kaylee's mother believes the killer wasn't a stranger. This is a small town, a college town, and I feel they knew this person, Christy said. We absolutely don't know that, but I feel that in my heart. I don't know why. So that's the mother's intuition there. Police told the family that it would take a while to investigate the crime since the perp left a mess, and the evidence was overwhelming. While investigators have not speculated a connection between the killer and the victims, Kaylee's family is certain that this crime required some level of planning. This person somehow snuck into the house, whether it was a door or window. He was not invited, Christy said. He came in with a weapon and with the intention to kill, not just one but four, one right after another, after another, after another. The family is in frequent touch with those working on the quadruple homicide. My husband is in contact with them every day, Christy said. The FBI, Moscow, and Idaho State Police, every day, it's nothing. I'm just like nothing, nothing. I don't know if it's because they have nothing or they are protecting the investigation. The family insisted that the only apprehension of the suspect would give them some semblance of peace. Turn yourself in, Christy urged, adding, stop all of this, let us mourn our children. We can't with this person out there, just end it. The guilt has to be overwhelming. Stop hiding. Unless, of course, this is really a sociopathic psychotic with no guilt. We really have no idea. So, Kaylee Gonzalez was not supposed to be there that night. Interesting. How many people knew that she wasn't supposed to be there? So, a few more rumors here It's being reported that a local said police have footage from a doorbell cam of a masked man entering or at least walking up to the house around 3 a.m. and got a somewhat discernible screen grab of his eyes, and this was shown to the neighborhood, frat and sorority houses, and I guess the frat identified the photo instantly as a man who lives on the same street. Another local admitted that they in fact gave the footage to the police. So is this not the house where they were murdered, but another house? Or, wait a second, or is it the murdered house, but the footage is from a different house, and it's kind of off in the distance? Another post here. Okay, rumor, but this sounds reliable from my perspective. I am 2 degrees separated from a super close and devastated friend of one of the victims. Apparently, law enforcement have a ring clip of a certain person of interest, mostly his eyes, on someone's cam. Police showed the vid to unspecified frat members, and they identified this person immediately. He was a neighbor of the victims at the time. Can't say for certain who that is without connecting a few logical dots here. So other people are also speculating on the Idaho Murders subreddit that the white hoodie guy from the food truck video was a former frat member who was kicked out, and also supposedly was one of the neighbors. So, okay, here's another post from Twitter that alleges that there are Redditors stating there was a guy kicked out of Ethan's fraternity because he was creeping the girls out. Ethan reported him. It is also said that this guy showed up at the frat party, a fight broke out, and Xana and Ethan left. Okay, so if this is true, then the police, if the police were called and it is related to Ethan and Xana, so supposedly the rumor here is there's a guy that got kicked out of the fraternity for creeping on the girls. Is this Madison and Kaylee? Ethan reported the guy that was creeping on Madison and Kaylee, possibly a stalker, whatever. This guy shows up to the frat where Madison and Kaylee are not, but Xana and Ethan are? And Ethan was the one who reported him? So, theoretically, are all 4 targeted, even though technically Xana, in this theory, didn't really do anything, but I don't know, this is really weird. This is really weird. What does everybody make of this theory? Does it all add up? And is there actually footage of a masked guy walking up to the house? Also, just rumor mill, but the guy in the hoodie at the food truck, is this another case of police said they cleared him, even though they really didn't? So from what I'm reading here just randomly on Reddit is that his alibi is that he left that night and drove hours to his parents' cabin or something. And then they cleared him. Like, where is this guy now? And what to make of that ring camera footage if it's legit? And how obvious could this guy be? Because, I mean, if he's on drugs or whatever, he's not thinking logically, okay. But he must know, did he not know that there was a Twitch stream at the food truck? Some people are alleging he did know because he looks uncomfortable, shifts, looks away from the camera, puts the hoodie on in the first place once he's in a certain view of the camera, and also points at the girls while he's actually not interacting with them in any way, while talking to a different guy about the girls and pointing to the girls. And then they leave without him. Yeah, I mean, it's all really weird. So what is it? So what is the theory here? He gets a mask and a knife and does all that? I mean, it's really weird. Is this the particular guy that got kicked out of the frat? If that's all true, and then he showed up at the frat and the police were called, then he goes to the corner club after he leaves. I mean, is this the same guy? This might not even be the same guy. Again, this is Mindshock. I'm not alleging anything is true or untrue. This is just a very, very perplexing case, but if they do have the ring camera footage and they do have DNA from under fingernails, I mean, that would be a lot more damning than just random DNA in the house. In which case, this seems to have a possibility of being solved. Obviously, the longer no arrest is made, the more the probability drops that arrest will be made. But if they're just crossing their T's and dotting their I's right now, which maybe they are, hopefully they are, but this is definitely a bizarre one, and a lot doesn't add up here. So We'll, of course, be continuing to cover this case as well as many other cases. Hope everybody found another edition of Mindshock True Crime interesting and informative. If you want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell for notifications. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Help support the channel that way. Like and share the Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, Patreon. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.